Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Victoria Eley. Very warm welcome to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for having me.
Well, you were introduced by lovely Kim Hamer, as was also Nick Bush, who's recently been on the show. So it's been great to have two recommendations, albeit that you've both had to wait quite a long time from the introduction to the actual recording because of the way that people have been queued up, because everyone seems to be so keen to come on the show. So it's been a pleasure waiting to have your story and your why being shared today.
Thank you. It has been a long time coming, but it will be worth the wait, hopefully.
So why don't you share with us where you are now, what you're up to, what's going on in your world?
Okay, so I am a passionate supported living landlord. I've built my business to help the vulnerable members of our society when they're most in need of somewhere that's safe and warm to live. So my portfolio, or majority of my portfolio at the moment, up in the northeast of England, houses homeless people, families, young single men, single women waiting to get into rehab or just needing a place to stay while they get themselves back on their feet. And I'm now working with a couple of housing associations in Sheffield. One deals with care leavers, so children from 16 to 18 and just beyond that are no longer a part of the care system and need somewhere that they can go, and also another homeless charity that deals with kind of sofa surfers, so not street homeless people, but people that are kind of finding themselves staying in spare rooms or in the office or in their car, and they're looking for somewhere to kind of get themselves on their feet. Obviously, you need an address to be able to get a job. So it gives them somewhere just kind of temporary short term while they can get themselves back on their feet, and then they can take on a standard AST of their own.
Sounds amazing, Victoria. And what I'd like to just highlight here is that sometimes landlords get bad rap, but this is the kind of work that landlords who are ethical, responsible, like you, like me, this is a type of work and the properties that we are offering out into the world.
Yeah, and I agree that we don't always have the best name, and I think it's that old adage that there's a few that spoil it for the many, and obviously there are landlords that aren't quite as ethical and provide houses that aren't really fit for purpose, but I pride myself in that I would live in any of my houses, and that's the kind of quality that I want to put out there. I certainly don't want to be a slum landlord at all. It's not what I want to be known for. And I recently had a conversation with somebody else about supported living, and he said that everywhere advertises no DSS. He said, well, you shouldn't be doing that anymore. I said, but I think that's just generally a bit of snobbery, and kind of opened him up to the whole world of supported living. And he had no idea that there was a whole sector of landlords that really provide homes for domestic violence sufferers, for homeless people, for refugees that have entered the country and need somewhere safe to live. So yeah, there's a whole sector of the industry that I think is completely underrated, undervalued, and in great need.
And you talked about properties that are fit for purpose. Let's spin that around about purpose and why property is the area that you work in. So
previously, I've always wanted to help. I've cared for my parents. They've both got a disability. They're both quadriplegic. And believe it or not, at 5'2", I was always the tallest person in my house. So it was always me that was up the ladder and reaching for the high stuff. And then I went on, and majority of my career was as a veterinary nurse. So I helped animals, got them back to health. One of my favourite stories was a cat that had fallen into the Thames and had been in there for a few hours, was very cold, very shocked, quite dehydrated when it came into us. And with just a bit of kind of basic first aid, warming it up, a bit of fluid, a bit of food, we got it back from kind of the brink of living to being a healthy, lovely cat. So that was a great story. So it's always been within me, I think, to help people. And my husband actually got started on the property journey. That was more his thing than mine. And he signed us up to a property seminar, which we went along. And when I discovered supported living and social housing, I just knew that was a part of who I am, to be able to give back and to help. and to provide a great lifestyle for my family while helping others is it's win-win.
And you talk about always wanting to help people, but there's that caring element to it. So caring for your parents, caring for animals, caring for people in general, not just in your own family. Where did that start? Can you remember, or is it just an inherent part of who you are?
I think it's just inherently part of who I am. Like I say, my parents' disability, it's a stature thing. So they're both only kind of 4 foot high. So I've always known them to be the size they are. It's not something that they've lost an arm or a limb and suddenly life has changed. That's always been who they are. But my mum says back to kind of when I was little, I was always willing to wash up, even at kind of the age of 4, and I wanted to help. And so I think it's just inherently part of who I am.
So with that and knowing who you are, how has understanding that guided you?
I think it has led, I've never been asked that question before. I think it has led me to always pick something in my life that I can make better. So I want to be able to make a difference in some way. And so, like you say, kind of caring for my parents and like offering to wash up when you're 4. I guess my 4-year-old likes to wash up. I think that's just because she likes splashing in the water personally. But I think it has defined my career as a veterinary nurse. That was obviously helping. And then, like I say, when we started in property, finding the supported living element, to me, then there was no choice about which path I would take. So I think it has kind of led me down my paths of helping people. I've always been a member of a charity or the PTA or something like that at school. So again, even unpaid, I like to be able to helping people. I like to be able to add value. And I kind of think if nobody gave back, we would be in a very sad society. So I think I'm digressing slightly from your point. Sorry, Amy. But I think, it's led me to make decisions about where I want to be in my life. And it means that I can fulfill that part of me as I go.
So you strike me as someone who's very strong and got a lot of go-getting oomph and drive there. Have there been vulnerable moments?
Definitely. And I think everyone has their moments. And there are days when I'm not quite so vivacious and it's a bit of a struggle. When I injured my back. So part of the reason I stopped nursing was I was lifting a Great Dane onto the X-ray table so that it could have its X-rays taken. And I slipped 2 discs in my lumbar spine. They've been recurring issues ever since. And I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, it got to the point where I couldn't barely walk. I couldn't take the kids to school. I couldn't drive. I couldn't do the housework. And my 80-year-old father-in-law was living with us and doing all of those things. So that made me quite vulnerable because you kind of think, well, when you reach kind of nearly 40, you should be looking after your parents or your in-laws, not vice versa. But it did make me I think it made me want to come back stronger and want to kind of live life to its fullest, because when you kind of end up like that and you can't move, you can't do simple things like pick your children up or walk them to school or something like that, it really makes you kind of judge life differently and you realise that it's definitely worth living.
So what would you say your main focus on why is at the moment, Victoria?
For me, it's, without sounding potentially selfish, having just said that I like to care for people, it's to give my family the best life that I can. So I grew up in a council house with my parents in South London, completely ordinary. We didn't have a lot of money. I had some secondhand clothes. I no doubt had some secondhand toys. We didn't go on exciting holidays every year. I had, and it sticks with me quite vividly, that I had a pair of Ascot trainers when my best friend had a pair of LA gear that had come from America when she just got back from holiday at Disneyland. And I was fine about the holiday to Disneyland, but the trainers, they were amazing. So for me, it's being able to give my family an amazing life and to be able to take them to far-flung destinations, to be able to give them experiences that I didn't have as a child. But the fact that I can then do that while helping other people, for me, is just an amazing feeling.
And I totally resonate with what you're saying there about wanting to give your family those opportunities that you potentially, you didn't have as a child. Where does that then or what happens for your children having had those opportunities? Will you see them wanting to continue that for their children, or will they not have so much of a drive because they've seen it as being just the way life is?
I think that depends on which child you're asking me about. We've got 3 girls. They're all very, very different people. The eldest one, I think, will kind of expect that as her life standards, but it's already at 14 making her question. She wants to become a makeup artist in special effects, but she also wants to have a property portfolio alongside that so that she doesn't have to work to pay her bills, and the work she does is because it's a passion. But she will do as little as she possibly can to get that lifestyle. She's inherently quite, I want to say lazy, but that's probably a little bit mean, but she doesn't like to put much effort in. The middle one is very astute, and I think she will have a lot of drive to be even better than we were. And then the littlest one, I'm not entirely sure. She's quite a comic. I'm not sure where she's headed. But I think, so I think it depends on their personalities. But the middle one, I think, will definitely have the drive to improve and make even more. And the eldest one will do it so that she doesn't have to work as hard, I think.
And what do you think your 3 girls get from having entrepreneurial parents?
I'm hoping that they see that it isn't necessarily a time for money exchange and that you don't have to be bound. Lots of their friends' parents work. They've worked all through the summer holidays. They work when they're at home from school in the evenings, and they know that we can be there and spend that time with them, and that we can be more flexible in our working arrangements. So I'm hoping that they see an alternative lifestyle to just the 9-to-5 grind that most of us grew up experiencing and having our parents in as well.
So I see a drive, I see competency, I see a huge amount of desire to make a difference. What do you do on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis to ensure that you're on top of things, that you are on target, you're reaching the goals that you've set yourself?
So I set my 5-year goals and my 1-year goals, and then they are broken down into generally monthly kind of checklists. So I know that if I want to buy, say, 4 properties in a year, then that means 1 a quarter. So then I know how many houses I need to view, how many offers I need to be putting in on an average to obtain that 1 property. So it kind of is working backwards for me that works really well, even down to quite annually the books that I read. So if I know I want to read 8 books in a year, I know I've worked out that that's, I think, 6 weeks roughly per book. And then I divide the amount of pages by the amount of days that I read. And then I know how many pages I need to read a day. So it's quite anal. Very left brain, I think. But for me, working backwards from your ultimate goal is the way that you're going to achieve them. And then you can my husband and I are very good at keeping each other accountable, and had a conversation with Kim this morning, funnily enough, about how we had a conversation on Monday and he kind of gave me the talking to that I needed to kick me back into action after summer holidays. But it is something that we both respect, and we both respect each other enough that we can have that kind of conversation and know that it's for the best for our family and for our businesses. But yeah, so it's having an accountability partner, and then, like I say, kind of reverse engineering what it is that you want to do.
So accountability is crucial, setting your goals and then breaking them down into bite-sized chunks. Have there been, you mentioned that you've got book targets for the year. Have there been any books that have been particularly influential for you?
I think 2 that stand out are Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I think most property entrepreneurs certainly have read, and also The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David Schwartz, that I thought was a fantastic book. It's got lots of notes scribbled in the edges of the pages. There's lots of underlining, and that gave me a really kind of good perspective and really helped with kind of increasing my scope and my mindset.
And with you mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad, and with that book, it's been a big favourite in the property community for sure. It's been one of those understanding the difference between assets and liabilities, and try and have a conversation with someone who is not in property and tell them that their home is a liability, they will not believe it. It's really interesting. And I remember driving down to France and I thought, oh, we've got captive audience here with the two children in the back. So it was quite a few years ago now, but so they were sort of early teens, and they listened to it, and we paused it and had a conversation about it. And it was really interesting for them to understand. And now they do understand. And you talked about your middle daughter having that drive and how she can do even better than you've done so far. But understanding that from an early age, I don't have regrets, but I do wish sometimes, if only I'd been more savvy as a younger kid.
But I think a lot of that, is to do with our surroundings and our upbringing. And it was just traditional that you swapped your time for money. And unless you had an entrepreneurial parent, I don't think that was even in anyone's kind of radar to think like that and to flip things on their head. And certainly for kind of some of the older members of my family and my husband's family, you went to work, you worked hard, you bought your own home, you bought and paid for your car, and that was how you went. So to try and flip that on its head to someone whose values are so ingrained, like you say, it's a difficult kind of understanding for people to get to. But actually, I think that book does a really good job of kind of breaking it down and making you understand kind of good debt, bad debt, and assets and liabilities, because it's not something that I'd been exposed to at all before.
Yeah, the difference, as you say, between good debt and bad debt is so crucial to understanding, especially when you're building a portfolio. Coming back to that, and the building of the portfolio and how much social housing is required, how much the supported living requirements are not being fulfilled. You are doing your best. What is it that other people could do to help out in this area? What is it that they could do in terms of making their properties suitable for this whole demographic?
So I think one important thing with it is whenever you buy property is to ensure that you have a second exit strategy. So whatever you are buying your property with that purpose for, you need to make sure that you have another strategy that would be viable. So if the bottom of the buy-to-let market suddenly falls out, what can you do? Or as we saw with service accommodation during the pandemic, obviously that ground to a complete halt, nobody was going anywhere. So that if that's your only model and your only exit, then that puts you in a compromising position with your property. So I'd be very careful about over modifying a property purely for supported living, because if that funding disappears from the housing association or the charity or the local authority that you're working with, you need to be able to revert that back to a standard buy-to-let or an HMO or a service accommodation. So you need to have another exit strategy in place. So be careful about overly modifying. But I think if you've got a property and you'd be interested in supported living, then you need to contact providers in that area and see what it is they're looking for. So I generally work on a buy-to-order basis. I make contact with the providers. I want to know what it is they're looking for. It's no good me buying one-bed flats if they're after 6-bed HMOs. So I tend to buy to order. But if you've got a property, there will be a supported living association, there'll be a housing charity, a local authority that will be able to use it, whatever size, whatever kind of property you have. So make contact with them. There's an amazing website that I'm happy to make a referral to if anyone wants to know. They can get in touch with me, and they deal directly with providers, and you can upload your property on there, and providers, if it ticks all the boxes, will approach you to take that property on. And I think there's a lot of snobbery, just to digress slightly, sorry, again, there's a lot of kind of snobbery when it comes to supported living, and people are like, I'm not sure that's for me, I'm not sure I want that kind of tenant, I'm not sure it's financially viable. But when you lease your property, generally on a supported living lease, you're leasing it to that housing association. So there's no voids, there's no management fees, there's no wear and tear, maintenance, property maintenance bills. That's all paid for by the housing association. So once you take all of those kind of minuses out of the cash flow, it may not be the highest cash flow to start with, but once you take away all of those elements, it then starts to cash flow quite well. So financially, it's rewarding, as well as being morally rewarding. So if you've got a property, then like I say, and you're kind of considering it, then reach out, you can find them on the internet. You only have to Google search them, and they'll come up, and you can approach them and see if they need your property.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that at the end we'll talk about how people can contact you, and make sure in the show notes that they're all those are listed as well. I just want to go back to the fact that you ended your career through the back injury. Do you miss the veterinary nursing? Do you miss those Great Danes and those cats that you pulled out of the Thames?
Yeah, a part of me does. And I had an amazing career, worked at lots of different practices. I spent most of it in a charity that provides treatment for sick animals rather than what you would deem as private practice. So you saw lots of varied cases and lots of sick pets rather than the routine stuff like vaccinations and neutering and that kind of thing. I don't miss the heavy lifting and I don't miss the draining hours. But yeah, and it kind of feels like everything I know is almost kind of wasted. I can tell you that red blood cell lasts for 120 days. Pointless information like that, which would have no benefit other than in nursing. So I do, yeah, I kind of feel that everything I learned and everything I did now is not being used. But the fact I've moved on to a new chapter, I've found another way to help and something else that I'm passionate about. So I do miss those days. I'm not sure I'd want to be nursing now, to be honest. It's long hours, it's draining, it's very emotionally draining. You get very invested in your patients, and if the treatment doesn't go the way you're hoping, then that can take its toll on you as well. But yeah, it's sad, but that chapter's ended and I'm on to the next one.
And you've got your own pets now, so it's all good.
Oh yes, we live in a zoo. There's a gecko, there's fish, there's a rabbit, there's a dog, there's loads.
It sounds fun. So what's next on the agenda for you, Victoria?
For me, I'm on a mission to try and encourage everyone to get into supported living. So whether you're in property or not, then yeah, I think everyone should be involved in supported living. Like I say, it's financially rewarding, it's morally rewarding, and you're helping people when they need it most. I have recently been approached about doing some coaching. So I'm just kind of in the process of setting that up. I'm starting now to try and speak wherever I can, podcasts, virtual stages, and lots of different places to try and spread the word about supported living and to get people as passionate as I am about getting involved.
So what would happen if your husband hadn't gone to that property seminar and pulled you into this area?
I think I would now be either working in a supermarket, now all the children are at school, or a very bored stay-at-home mum. So after I left nursing, the eldest one was only 2. And like I said, we've gone on to have 2 more children. I love being at home with kids. I love that I'm here when they get home from school. I love that I can spend the holidays with them. But this has given me a whole real sense of purpose and made me grow massively as a person. So yeah, I think I'd either possibly be working somewhere mundane or bored at home watching Netflix. So I'm so glad that he signed us up and took us in a whole new direction.
And had you done much sort of mindset or personal development beforehand?
No, not at all. Self-development was a whole new thing to me. And it has now become a huge part of who I am. Like I say, I read daily, do a lot of mindset work. I've overcome quite a few big blocks in kind of finding out who I am, where my blockages are. Had a conversation recently about an event that happened in my life. And I worked with a breakthrough coach because I'd got to the point where I was feeling like I wasn't quite good enough to be where I was and that I wasn't worth it. And so I worked with a breakthrough coach and we had a session, went back to that event in my early childhood, which I would have said to you I was completely apathetic about, that I had no strong feelings about it and that I was completely over it. But it turns out that actually that was causing a huge block that I was completely unaware of. So it's completely changed who I am, where I see myself in 5 years' time. And the fact that I know now that I will never know it all and I will keep on growing.
And do you know, out of curiosity, have you ever done the wealth dynamics?
No.
I was just curious to find out where you sat on that particular grid. You clearly have probably done your Myers-Briggs personality profiles and things like that.
I've done is that the animal one?
It can be.
It can be. Okay. So I think I'm a dolphin on that one.
Okay.
When I took the animal, is that?
Yeah. There's Nigel Risner does the animal, and he does the lion, the owl, the dolphin, and the
monkey.
Monkey, which is who he is. And I've had Nigel Risner on the podcast, and he's talked all about how he uses those particular tools to assess a room, to think about who he's working with. And when he's doing workshops, it really helps to know where people fit into those different areas. So it's really interesting. But I've been working a lot with clients recently using their wealth dynamics, because it's where you sit naturally in creating and building and retaining your wealth, and then knowing who you need on your essentially sort of your power triangle, the other two people that you need, so that you've got all 8 different areas covered. And it's really quite interesting when you know where you sit naturally, who you need, and then what effect that will have on your roles and responsibilities in creating and as I said, holding on to your wealth. So yeah, really
that sounds amazing. I'll be off to look at that afterwards. This is what I love. You're always learning something new, always something different to look at.
And it's interesting as well, when you spoke about the breakthrough coaching that you had, how you were unaware that you had a block. And many people are unaware that they've got blocks that are holding themselves back. They don't realize they've got limiting beliefs in different areas, particularly around money. The money mindset is fascinating. And with that, also some of the core emotions that you have and how you then build on those over the years. And again, you don't realize that there was an initial trigger back in your early childhood where you experience that particular emotion, and every time something comes up, it just carries on, and you don't realize you've got those blocks and those situations happening. So fascinating work. I do a lot of timeline therapy and hypnosis work with clients who then want to sort of go and experience it and see what the learnings are. And that's where you just said, there's so many learnings all the time once you know from the circumstances. Yeah.
And I think one of the first times that I really saw how a shift in mindset can alter your perspective was, as you'll see from the show notes, I'm running the virtual London Marathon on the 3rd of October for Dementia UK. That all started in my rehabilitation from my back injury. So I went to see the physio, and he said to me, "You can do any exercise you like, just start slowly." And I said, "But my whole body screams at me every time I go to move." And he said, "That's just your brain on red alert telling you just to be careful." He said, "You've just got to tell it that it's absolutely fine." So I said to him, "So can I start running?" And he said, "Yeah, you can start running." He said, "Download the Couch 5K." He said, "But just take it carefully." So I'd never run anything other than a bath, Amy, prior to this. Honestly, if we had to run at school, I used to hide. I hated running. So I downloaded the Couch 5K. And I think about week 6 or week 8, you go from running for 8 minutes to running for 25 minutes. And I looked at that, and I used to kind of skip ahead and look at what I was doing the next week. And I looked at that and I was like, there's no way I can run for 25 minutes. I am dying after 8 minutes. And I was like, I can't do it. There's no way I can manage to run for 25 minutes. That's crazy. And then I kind of thought about it during the week, and I'd said this to my husband, and I said, but if at this point in the program, everyone got to 25 minutes, couldn't manage it and gave up, then they wouldn't have it at that point in the program. They wouldn't have everyone stumbling at week 8. So it must be possible. Otherwise, they wouldn't put it in there. So I was like, no, come on then, Vic, kind of sort yourself out. You can do it. If it's in the program, it must be possible because everyone does it. So I went off and I ran for 25 minutes. And I think I was prouder at that point than when I finished my half marathon last year, because I'd completely convinced myself that I was never going to be able to run for 25 minutes. And I finished it and I felt absolutely amazing. And I think it was purely just that shift in mindset. I think if I'd have gone on that 25-minute run telling myself that I couldn't do it and I couldn't manage it, I wouldn't have done it. So to kind of shift that round and turn it around and say, well, it must be possible. I went and I did it, and I'm not telling you that it was easy, but I survived, and I did it. And then, like I say, I'm now running 18 miles at the moment and 20 miles at the weekend, and then 26 miles in 3 weeks' time. So, yeah, anything's possible if you've got the right mindset, I think.
Well, it's even closer than that, because this podcast is out very close to your date. So this podcast is going to be released on the 23rd of September, which is now the day. So literally
10 days before.
Yeah, 10 days before. So there we go, putting you into the future. Have you always had that sort of self-competitive streak?
No. And I think that has come from my self-development. I've always been quite self-deprecating, and I'd give it a go, but if I couldn't do it, I couldn't do it. But now, and I think goal setting's had a lot to do with that. I set my goals, and I know that I can get myself there with the right mindset and the right people around me, that there'll be nothing to stop me. So I think that has all come from this self-development journey. And listening to another podcast the other day on a completely separate topic, someone said, well, if they're not getting there, it's because their why is not strong enough. And I think that obviously quite apt for this podcast, but I think that is really, really true. And the drive to give my family that life, I now know that I will reach my goals, and that's not questioned.
Yeah, absolutely. The why is not strong enough for sure. If and also not aligned with your values, it's not something that you value as being a priority.
Yeah, completely. So I think if property potentially was all about just earning some money, I'm not sure it would be completely aligned with who I am, and I wouldn't have got quite so passionate about it. But the fact that I can do it while helping other people, that obviously aligns with one of my real core values and pushes me on even further.
And you mentioned about having the right people around you. Clearly, you've got a very supportive husband who also gives you sort of quite full-on pep talks.
Yeah.
Who else have you surrounded yourself with?
So I think there's a phrase, isn't there, that you become who you surround yourself with, and that you kind of, I think I learned fairly early on in the journey. So to start with, I was surrounding myself with other new property investors. But then through my coach and through other events that I've been to, I've really kind of leveled up, and I'm now looking at kind of higher level entrepreneurs such as Kim, and surrounding myself then with other people that are very goal orientated and want to improve their lives, want to improve the lives of others. So I think it is about who you have in your network. And if I'd have stayed with kind of some of the mums at the school gate, I don't know if the drive would be the same as surrounding myself with the entrepreneurs that I'm around.
Well, let's see who else we can bring into your network. How could people get in contact with you?
So I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. There's not that many people with the surname of Eley, so I shouldn't be too hard to find. And the SBM Property Group website, they're all in the show notes. But yeah, I'm on most social media.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure they go into the show notes, as you say. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I want to say thank you to Kim for introducing us. It's been really good fun exploring why you do what you do today, Victoria. Do you have some final words for the audience, please?
I do. Again, going back to that very first property seminar, one of the things that was displayed up on the wall was the phrase, fear is temporary and regret lasts forever. And I have adopted that as my go-to phrase. Fear is temporary, but regret certainly will last forever. So if there's something you want to do, bite the bullet and go ahead and do it.
Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star Apple Podcast review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, and become a member of my inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. I help people to focus on their why with clarity, uniting their passion with their purpose with a plan, to create the life they truly desire. If you would like me to help you focus on your why, then please book a free 20-minute coaching call via calendly.com/Amy Rowlandson. And if you haven't already, please sign up for the Friday Focus weekly newsletter via my website, amyrowlandson.com. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.